Good afternoon. My name is Liza Gentile, and I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations here at Johnson & Wales University and a proud alum. Thank you for joining us for the JWU Alumni Pride Panel. We're excited to bring you this discussion with a dynamic panel of alumni. Come from different walks of life and come together today to share stories from their personal experiences. Before we get started, I'd like to set the expectation that this discussion is a safe space, free from all forms of discrimination, harsh criticism, and harassment. This is an extension of our JWU values, which are reflected in the university's recently released diversity statement, which can be found at the link in the chat. We will also provide a link to it in our follow-up email. All questions for the panelists can be submitted anonymously to ensure participants' privacy. Hate speech of any kind will not be tolerated and will result in the immediate removal from the program. Questions for the panelists can be added to the Q&A section. They will be answered at the conclusion of the program. Please use the chat to message other attendees. Now, I'm pleased to welcome Dameian Slocum, class of 2003 with his master's, and he's also the Associate Dean for Student Services. He'll moderate today's conversation. Dameian oversees residential life, transportation services, and off-campus student services, an area he developed from concept to operation. In addition to his work on campus, he also has the responsibility for relationships with the neighborhoods that surround the campus. He spent 20 years advancing his career at JWU. His love of student affairs began in his role as resident assistant in 1998. It continued as he became a resident director and continues today as associate dean. He's actively involved in the JWU community, working to increase student engagement and student support. His commitment to JWU is made even more clear in his role as chair of Campus 2022, a notable and productive cross-functional team working to impact our Providence campus since the fall of 2019. Campus 2022 is responsible for creating several events and activities that have become hallmarks on our campus, including Ignite the Night, the Senior Send-Off, JWU Gold, a mentorship program for commuter students, and the Transformation Approaches Expo, a professional development event for faculty and staff. Dameian served as the chair of Star Res International Advisory Board for 4 years and was honored by the housing software company for his service. He recently participated in the New England Educational Research Organization's annual conference as a symposium presenter. He is actively involved in mentorship both at JWU and beyond. Dameian has a Bachelor of Arts in Marketing and an MBA in International Leadership, and recently completed his doctoral degree in Educational Leadership with his dissertation exploring the COVID-19 pandemic from a student affairs perspective. Dameian and his husband enjoy living in Providence and have been together for more than 20 years. They held a commitment ceremony in 2003 and made their marriage legal in 2017. Though he now considers himself a Rhode Islander, he will always be a son of New Orleans, Louisiana, where he was born and raised. Please join me in welcoming Dameian Slocum.
Liza, thank you so much for that warm welcome. I'm so happy to be here today to speak with our panelists. Let's get starting by getting to know them a little bit. Please allow me to welcome Jonathan, Michelle, Sarah, and Lou to the program. We're excited to have you with us. Would you please each take a few moments to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you identify your story and your involvement in the community? I'd like to start with Jonathan, please.
Sure. Thanks, Dameian. Thanks, Liza and Laurie and the rest of the JWU community for having us today. So as Liza mentioned, or I guess maybe not mentioned, but it was on the slide. So I graduated 2012 with my undergrad in finance, and then 2018 with my master's in HR. So Johnson Wales is near and dear to my heart. And I currently we live in Stoughton, so it's about 17 miles south of Boston. I work in Boston, or out of my home right now, but I work for KPMG, which is a professional services firm. And my husband and I, we've been married almost 5 years, and we're expecting a little one, which I know I'll be talking about a little bit later.
Congratulations.
So excited for today. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Michelle, please.
Hi, thanks for having me here. My name is Michelle Mooney. I graduated 2015, and I am currently working on my master's in public administration and hope to be done this December. So everyone keep your fingers crossed for me. I currently live and work in Providence. I work for an organization called ResCare, and I am having a brain fart. I identify as queer, she, her pronouns. My involvement in the community is really with the Board of Directors for SHIP, which is a sex education focused org on providing adults the resources they need. And we have a lot of LGBTQIA adults who come to us for support and information programming, including a bunch of workshops. And we are really focused on making sure that we have diverse offerings as well as diverse educators who have the lived experiences within these communities. And my job with ResCare is really focused on working with adults and families who have been made vulnerable by the systems and denied opportunities. So within this, there is a surprising number of queer parents and LGBTQIA children. So I really hope that I'm able to leverage my personal experiences and resources to support them.
Michelle, thank you so much and welcome to the panel. We're glad to have you here. Sarah, please.
Hi, my name is Sarah DeCataldo, and I am a 2004 graduate of Johnson & Wales University's Criminal Justice Program. I have been connected to Johnson & Wales since I first started at Johnson & Wales in 2002. And I'm really excited to be here today. Full-time, I work as the Deputy Director of Advancement at Sojourner House, which is an organization in Rhode Island that provides shelter, housing, and support to individuals impacted by domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. And one of the programs that I'm most proud of at Sojourner House is our LGBTQ program. And we can accept folks into our shelter and housing programs regardless of their gender identity, gender expression, which is really important to me. On a personal note, I sit on the board of SAGE RI, which is an organization dedicated to advancing the rights and support of LGBTQ senior citizens and supporting those who have really laid the groundwork for folks like me and all of us on this panel is really important to me. I live in Cranston, Rhode Island with my wife. We just celebrated our 5-year wedding anniversary, 10 years together. We kept the same date. I'm not great with dates. So 10 years together, 5 years married. I also have taught adjunct at Johnson & Wales in the past, and I just feel really connected to Johnson & Wales University, and giving back to the institutions that have taught me and given me so much is so important. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Sarah, thank you so much. And again, congratulations. And my husband and I kept the same date for the exact same reason, horrible with dates. And last but certainly not least, Lou, please.
Hello, everybody from San Francisco. So I think it's now afternoon. My name is Lou Rodriguez, and part of my voice, I feel like I'm losing it. So I'll try my best to speak clearly. I graduated with a degree in marketing communications in 2010. And since then, I have started a small business in the event space. And then shortly after the pandemic, I had to pivot and I started another company that is completely unrelated to my other company. So I guess entrepreneurship is in my DNA, and I'll be speaking about that a little bit later today. As far as my work in the community, I program events that bring the people together, whether it's for social reasons or for professional networking reasons or to fundraise. So I'll speak a little bit on that too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Lou, and thank you for joining us from the West Coast. We really appreciate having you here. Again, welcome and thank you to all of our panelists for being here today. So let's dive right in. I'm going to start with a question for both Sarah and Jonathan, if that's okay. Here at JWU, we pride ourselves with helping prepare graduates for the workforce. Can you talk a little bit about being out at work or finding your fit in an organization?
I can start off. So I have been fortunate enough to work at in the professional services field since graduating college. So mainly I started in audit, and I work at one of the big four professional services firm, which were known for audit, tax, and consulting. So Fortunately, I've always had generally good experiences with being out. My coworkers have always made me feel comfortable by being myself. I've told the story plenty of times before, but at a previous firm that I used to work at, there was just really one experience that I had where I didn't really feel like I could bring my whole true authentic self to work. So my boyfriend, I guess at that point, now my husband, we had recently become engaged. So we both exchanged rings, and I had worked on an audit team where it was a very macho bro type of feel with straight men. And we were in Kansas, and there was times where he'd be on some dating app at that point. It was like, oh, this girl's hot. What do you think? I'm like, yeah, she's hot, totally. And I didn't feel like I could bring myself to the table and say, I'm actually gay. I have a boyfriend. So in between that audit and our closing dinner for the audit, we had gotten engaged. So went to the dinner, and I just took off my ring because I was like, there's a room full of people I don't know. I don't want to bring this conversation up. And it was definitely a learning moment for myself. I think from there I grew, and I said, you know what, like I've never felt like I needed to, like I wouldn't be in a safe zone if I came out and told my story to these folks that are strangers essentially to me. Um, and thankfully from there on, I was kind of like, you know what, it's my closest people that I work with at work. There's no issues there. I feel like I have a safe space. Leaders at the organization I didn't feel like there was any pressure for me not to be myself. So from there on, I kind of just went on with my life. People would say, hey, you're going to bring your wife to this event? I'm like, well, if I had a wife, I would, but I have a husband or a fiance, then I'll bring him. And they were all, of course, everyone's like, oh, I'm so sorry for assuming. And I've always had that feeling. And even coming to this firm that I've been at with for just about 4 years now, I've been able to be co-chair of our Boston Pride group, been involved with the community, been to conferences. So this firm is definitely very supportive of all of our people, not just our folks that are part of Pride, but all of our different business resource groups around ethnicity, disabilities, other things like that, working parents. So I've always felt like I could be myself and really kind of serve as like a mentor to others that are younger within the firm or that might be struggling with coming out as well. And I know everyone has different stories at work and different experiences, different backgrounds, upbringings, but I think generally the firm is really supportive of our people and bringing their true self to work, because at the end of the day, if we can't be true to ourselves, how does that get the best quality out of our employees and the people that we work with?
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. It's so important to have a safe space. And when you can have that at work, it just makes your whole quality of life better. That's what I believe anyway. Please, Sarah.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of a unique experience because when I first attempted to come out, times were a little different in the late 90s. And I went to an all-girls Catholic school, which was also a unique place to attempt to come out. And I was pretty much rejected by my peers, and school was not a safe space for me. So I went quickly back into the closet. And I feel like my gravitation towards the domestic violence and sexual assault movement was probably a little bit natural for me, because when I first started volunteering my senior year of high school, work in the domestic violence field was actually a really safe space for me, because a lot of the individuals who founded the domestic violence and sexual assault movement identified as queer and lesbian and gay. And so work actually became one of the safest spaces for me, where I could actually feel like I could be myself. And really was surrounded by individuals who accepted me for who I was. And so this year I celebrate 20 years in the domestic violence movement. And I'm actually leaving the domestic violence movement. July 30th is my last day, and I'm going to be starting my own nonprofit consulting business. And I really thank you. I really owe my path and future to the movement, because had it not been for that safe space, I don't think I would be where I am today. So I'm forever grateful to work, to the movement, for allowing me the space to be who I am, allowing me the space to grow and mess up and figure things out, which was really important to me. And I'm always going to hold a special place in my heart for the movement, because really it's been a part of who I am. But I'm also really excited for this next chapter and to see how I now am able to interact with various disciplines and individuals not being a part of the movement. So I'm forever grateful and really appreciate the opportunity that I had, because in the 90s, it was interesting. It wasn't as fun as it is now. And that's why helping Sage RI is so important to me, because I can't even imagine what it was like for folks in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And really, they are the ones that paved the way for all of us to be on this panel today, which is amazing. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I think the through line between what I'm hearing from both you and Jonathan is that, life is better when you can be fully yourself, especially at your place of work. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to move on to another question now that's sort of related. And this question is for Lou and for Jonathan. We are multifaceted beings, and work is just a portion of our lives. Can you tell us a little bit about what else is going on in your life through the lens of your identity? So we'll start with Lou.
Okay, I'll kick it off. Loaded question, and thank you, Damien. So within like the last, I'll break it down, I guess, in the last year or so, with everything going on, it's been challenging to connect with my peers, particularly people in my community. A lot of things have gone virtual. I'll be very honest, I'm not a virtual type of person, considering that my business is to program live events. So finding unique ways to connect with people has been quite a mission for me, and sort of something that we weren't really prepared for in school, actually. Come to think of it, pivoting is such a crucial component to business, and I'm learning as I'm going, and I think for me it's just like been a lot of learning, restructuring, learning a lot of questions, leaning on people, learning to ask for help, which is also something that is something I'm not really familiar with, and it's okay to ask for help. And leaning on people in my community. For instance, I'll give an example here. I joined the local Chamber of Commerce for the LGBT community in Boston. And God, I'm glad I did, because without that resource, and I wouldn't have landed on an SBA loan, or I wouldn't have been connected to programs to help position me for my new company. And from things from like business planning, to getting funding and critical thinking. There's so many things that were available to me. And of course, it's who you know. And through this organization, I was able to pivot and quite frankly thrive with this new product that I've launched. But so I guess within the last, I'd say 14 months or so, this has been my involvement with the community, and really just leaning on people that are like me and like-minded when I really needed the help and support, and it's okay. So that's a little bit more about what's been going on with me. Jonathan?
Lou, I thought you were going to talk about the fabulous pins that we're rocking over here. But just, yeah, I think so, taking work out of it, which obviously work is a huge part of life. And like I said, I'm working from home, so this is pretty much where I live, and I'm chained to this desk pretty much all day. So as I mentioned earlier, my husband and I are actually expecting a child as well. So it didn't dawn on me until we actually started talking about this panel that I always mention, as being a gay man, I feel like we have to come out every day of our lives and really have to gauge who we decide to share that with, as a gay man or as a queer individual or another member of LGBTQI. So it didn't dawn on me that, like, saying, oh, I'm a father, and then saying, okay, I'm married to another man, so he's also the father. And just, I feel like this child's not born yet, but I just see in the next 18 years of constantly having to come out again in another aspect of our lives. So it's coming out to people at work, coming out to new friends, or friends of friends, and really choosing who we want to share that with. But as a parent, people are going to naturally see and say, where's the mom? Or of course, when they are fine with the two parents thing, it's all right, well, how was this child made? Was it the child adopted? Was the child the surrogate? The jokes, or not the jokes, but the comments of, oh, who carried the baby, things like that, like personal details that people do not need to know, of course, but it's a matter of thinking through, like, do we come out? Do we share those vulnerabilities with people that we don't necessarily know? And how will they judge us? I think I talked to a lot of our straight friends, and things like just choosing where to live. Like, we're happy with where we live in Massachusetts. I'm a New England boy, born and raised in Connecticut, went to school in Providence, and been in the Boston area for the past over a decade. So it's kind of things, whereas like that's another aspect of our lives. Like if we wanted to up and move somewhere else, does that community support what we're trying to do with our lives and raise a family and start a family? So it's tough. It's something I didn't think that another aspect of being a member of this community I'd have to think about, and really now have to protect the child coming into this world from the harsh world that we live in, unfortunately. And social media doesn't make that any better either. So it's just some definitely different things that I think navigating, and there's a few handful of individuals they know that are members of our community that are parents. So I know I'll certainly be leaning on those folks for advice, but it's definitely something I didn't really imagine having to go through.
I can appreciate what both of you are saying, because I think that for me, what I take away from that is that even during the middle of the pandemic, even in the midst of us, life goes on and we're trying to figure out how do we make sense of where we are now. And the thing that you both spoke so well about is the ability to lean on others, and what does that look like, and how those resources are going to come to bear in the next phase of whatever comes, during the next couple of years. And I appreciate that. And I think the other part that really resonates for me is that none of us are done. We're continually growing out and we're continually pushing forward. And that sort of leads into my next question, which is about social impact and activism, as it has been a major theme of the last couple of years in particular. What is some of the advocacy work that you are currently involved in? And I'll start with Michelle.
Thanks. I want to just echo that feeling of coming out again and again. And I feel immensely thankful that a lot of the advocacy work that I have been involved with, I feel has really embraced me and has really given me a space to use my queer identity to kind of step out and use that as a leverage point. And it all kind of started when I was a student at Johnson & Wales, how many years ago now, knocking on doors for marriage equality of Rhode Island, being like, people should be allowed to marry. And that was one of my favorite things to do, writing postcards. And I think that was really my first taste, and where I said, what more can I do? So down the road, I got introduced to SHIP, which I'm now on the board of directors for as the vice chair. I'm also on the board of Trinity Gateway Historic Improvement Association, which I'll get into what they do another time, but it's really exciting. And I feel thankful because all of that kind of pushed me to do a fellowship with the Women's Fund of Rhode Island, which focused on giving people who identify as female the tools that they need to do advocacy and policy work at the State House. And it really led me to being involved in a follow-up coalition called Raising Rhode Island, which aims to lift families out of poverty. And so a lot of these are not specifically just focused on the LGBTQIA community. There's so many overlaps of identities, and there has been I feel as if my identity as a queer person has allowed me to come in with my own perspective and to be able to say, this is what we need to change, right? Families in poverty are all across the board. There are queer families and queer children, and how do we better support them, and how do we lift them up? And, how do I focus on providing testimony or advocacy at the State House level, because I'm tired of seeing kind of the same faces. So it's really been exciting, because I've never felt this until this point in my life, which feels kind of sad, but until this point in my life, I've never felt like my queer identity or my even identity as a woman was something I could step forward and really use to be the leverage point for me to want to be involved in this, and also to be the thing that helps shape a lot of that policy. So I feel very lucky.
Thank you for sharing that. Some really powerful words and experiences you've just talked about, and I really appreciate that. Lou, would you like to jump in here?
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan, congrats on becoming a parent. Michelle, thank you so much for sharing some of that with us. Great work is being done. And I'll speak a little bit about some of the programming that I've done, particularly around current events. In the trans community, we've seen a lot of adversary. We've seen, quite frankly, mortality, whether it's domestic or abroad, and it's just not acceptable. And so I was thinking about, how can we solve this problem? How can the business that I've started connect with this community and give them the ability to have a platform to feel like themselves and look in the mirror and say, like, this is me. Like, I feel like me today. Like, we all get to do in the morning, right? So I decided to host a panel much like this in partnership with one of my clients at the W Hotel in Boston. And we had Carmen Carrera, that was on RuPaul's Drag Race. I'm not sure what season, forgive me. But there was some issues that went along with it, but in the long term, some of the issues that came from there were about pronouns, and she was being misrepresented, and it became a bigger discussion, which is great, which is good. Sometimes those things become conversations, and we need to have these conversations. And so we wanted her to give her side of things and give her story. We had it moderated from some of the publications in the city. And I was listening to Carmen, and one of the things that she said, and it just stuck with me, and she said, it's expensive to look this way. And when she said that, a light bulb went off in my head, and I was just like, whoa, like, it wasn't even something that I had thought about. I mean, yes, we like go shopping for our clothes and, you know, accessories and whatnot, but the amount of time and effort that it takes to put her look together to feel like a woman, she identifies as woman, she, her. And I was like, this is something that I can help with, because one of my companies, we provide hair and makeup services for brands and corporations, particularly at conferences and trade shows. So I said, why not host a pop-up experience for the trans community where they can come in? We can have it sponsored by cosmetic companies that actually pay attention to the community, not just for the month of June for Pride, but all of the time. And we can teach, we can show these people how a simple application can be done, so it can make them feel more like them. And I have to tell you, I stood back after like the programming was happening, and it was the stories that we heard and the reactions that we saw when people had the reveal, when they finally saw themselves in their best version or what they really wanted, was phenomenal. It was one of the best moments I've ever had in my career. And we called it Tea Time. And we would like to take this on the road, actually. We thought this pilot run was a success. And this community obviously has been in the media, and it's been ugly. And we wanted to change some of that and help. You know, again, problem solving is so important. And, you know, there's that T part in LGBT that sometimes just gets left out, and we can't forget about that T part. And I'm looking forward to doing more of that type of work. And I'm happy to, you know, lean again, that seems to be some of the momentum in this conversation. Lean on anybody that's in this discussion today on the panel or in the audience that is connected to the trans community. We want to hear from you. We want to know how we can better improve the program. So please reach out. And you know, we would like an advisory board. You know, so we're making sure that we're addressing things correctly and that we can reach as many people as possible.
Lou, thank you for that. I think you're doing some wonderful work there. And as you said, our trans family members are just as important as everyone else. And we should be doing everything we can to lift them up and shed light on their world and their experience, because it's all a part, it's all universal. And I think that that's where we have to go. We have to go where we're needed. Sarah, please, I want you to jump in here as well and talk a little bit about social impact and activism and some of the work that you're doing.
Sure. So I have some experience with activism and advocacy in a few different areas. With SAGE, it's a grassroots organization that's actually undergoing organizational capacity development work right now. And one of the big things that they have been doing is providing training and technical assistance to nursing home facilities and long-term care facilities throughout the state, because so many of them lack the information, lack the knowledge and awareness. And there's still so many of our senior citizens in the LGBTQ community that aren't safe or comfortable being out. And so the more training that we can do for these long-term care facilities, because guess what? I'm so sorry, everyone on this call, you're all gonna get old, right? We're all gonna age. And it's really important to me that my queer brother and sisters and individuals get access to support and services and healthcare that best fits their needs and their identity. And that when we are thinking about later in life and where we're going to live and who's going to help us to kind of take care of ourselves, that it's by individuals and by organizations that understand that my wife is my wife and not my sister, which happens a lot. So that's just kind of one example. Another piece, over the past 20 years, I have worked very closely with law enforcement. And although the institution of law enforcement is certainly problematic, I leverage my positive relationships with them to make positive change. And a few years ago, I helped to develop a curriculum specific for law enforcement. And we trained every single Providence police officer on understanding LGBTQ cultural competency and issues impacting the LGBTQ training. And I've been training law enforcement for 20 years, and that training was one of the first over my career where I literally had police officers coming up to me at the end saying, thank you for explaining to me the difference between gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation, because so many of them didn't even know there was a difference. They just hear LGBTQ and they think gay and lesbian, and that's it. And we know it's so much more than that. And so if I can leverage some of the positive relationships that I've had to educate folks to make this community better for those of us who identify as LGBTQ, then I want to do what I can. And so those are just a couple of examples of the activism that we've done. I also sit on the board of the Providence Center, which provides treatment and support to individuals living with mental illness and substance use. And we know that behavioral health issues impact our community at higher rates than lots of other communities. And the more that I can do to educate folks about how mental health is a part of overall health and wellness and is just as important as getting your blood pressure checked and getting your eyes checked every year, going to therapy and getting your behavioral health on track is really important, especially for those in our community who experience bullying, depression, anxiety, PTSD, all of those things. So those are just a few different examples.
Thank you so much. The work that all three of you spoke about and that you're doing makes me proud to be a Wildcat and proud to count myself amongst you all as peers. So thank you for that. I want to shift gears for a moment and talk about mentorship. I'm going to direct this question to both Jonathan and Michelle. And Michelle, I'm going to ask you to answer first, if that's okay. Can you share what mentors or programs supported you, or are you engaged in any mentorship type activities within the community?
Thanks. So this is another point in my life that I feel I've been lucky to have a lot of, variety of mentors. When I was an undergrad at Johnson and Wales, I feel like I was just kind of coming into my queerness, and I was just kind of owning who I was, but I didn't really know where I fit and where I fell on that spectrum that Sarah just spoke about. And it was hard because, I came from a place in New Hampshire where this really wasn't talked about. And so I felt really lucky to find Pride Alliance, and this really became my initial community at Johnson and Wales. And I've made so many lifelong friends who, I feel fortunate enough to still talk to today because they've been my community that they've carried forward. And I hope that I would say we have like peer-to-peer mentoring, they're teaching me things from their identities, and I'm teaching them things about my world. And I hope that it's kind of like this peer-to-peer level thing, and it's great. And then also, we get together and we have dinner, and we order bad Chinese and things like that. That's not really but I also was very fortunate where I met Karina, and I found the Gender Equity Center, which really became my haunt for the time that I was at Johnson and Wales. And so much so that even if I didn't have classes, I was showing up to be like, what are people doing today? Because I was like, this is where I am. This is my community of folks. This is where I'm accepted. This is where it's okay to start to ask questions. And then I got to meet so many other people through working at the orientation program, or I worked at Starbucks on Harborside, which I was very well caffeinated while I was there as well. But not everybody was a queer mentor either. Not everybody fell in the LGBTQIA community, but I think that was really powerful to have anyways, because these were just people who just wanted to love me and accept me and support me, and were rooting for me, and were rooting for every part of my identity, and they weren't picking and choosing. And I think that just became, for me, allowed me to, 1 year say I felt this way, the next year say I felt this way, and really kind of come into my own. And so I was so thankful for that. And now I don't engage in any, I would say, direct mentoring programs, but I really do hope through the advocacy work and my regular day job that the people that I'm touching, that they can see that there's life and there's opportunity to grow and to become whoever they want to be, and that I'm rooting for them.
Thank you so much. Jonathan, would you like to pick up on that thread?
Similar to Michelle, I came from a small town in Connecticut, and it's interesting. I think back to this often. I wasn't necessarily out in undergrad. It was just kind of something I didn't talk about. And I actually came out shortly after graduating. And although I was super involved in undergrad, student alumni association, student government, some other organizations on campus, I always felt that it was a safe space. And I think that's probably why I naturally gravitated towards Johnson Wales. I attended some of the summer programs before I got accepted in when I was in high school. And it was just always this overwhelming feeling of being comfortable and safe. And I went to a relatively large high school. So I kind of always had this feeling that I wanted to go to a larger city from coming from a small town, but I knew I didn't want to go to New York City because it's way too much. But I also wanted to be within driving distance of home so I could bring my laundry back home on the weekends. So I just always felt this safe space on campus. And I wish I was more involved with a Pride Alliance or the Gender Equity Center when I was undergrad, but that's why I'm trying to make up for it now, post-grad. So I just always felt this safe space, and whatever I could do to be more of a mentor now. I think of in the workplace now, like I said, I was part of the Boston Pride organization for my firm. I was the co-chair. We helped put a conference on in Boston for our coworkers to really show the LGBT efforts that we are as a community trying to do, and what the firm is helping advance as well for our colleagues. So I've kind of taken that role on as a mentor within my organization. Some of our friends as well. It's interesting now being in this phase of my life where we're starting a family, because now I feel like folks that are also in our community are like, oh, how did you go about the surrogacy process? How did you do this? Or what made you want to do this? And it's weird because I never thought that of myself as being the mentor or the adult So it's really funny now being in this space where it's like, okay, like I am actually like what I'm doing is helping other people as well, like get through things in their life. And if they have questions, I am seen as that safe space now where people can come to me and ask me questions as well. So it's definitely a different aspect of my life than I thought I would be in, but I guess that's what happens 30 plus now, right?
It's amazing how the cycle continues, right? And then you find your place. And I think one of the amazing things about what I'm hearing from all of you is the fact that, although your experiences may be different in terms of finding your place and finding your comfort and coming out multiple times in different scenarios, you're actively involved in making it better for those who are coming behind us. And I think that that's wonderful. And hopefully we'll get to a place where coming out won't be such a big deal in any environment that we find ourselves in. I think we have time for one more question before we start taking questions from our alums who've been listening and watching along with our conversation here. For all of us here, Stonewall was just 52 years ago. And while progress has been made, there's still a lot to be done. Just listening to you all talk as panelists, you've identified several spaces where we still have a lot of growth to do and a lot of work to do. We're still working towards the protection and visibility and acceptance of many members of our community. So to me, the celebration of Pride is just as relevant today as it was in 1969. So I'll start with Lou, and then if anyone else wants to jump in and answer the question, that would be great. What are some of the ways that you are celebrating Pride?
So there's a lot of ways that sometimes we don't really consider, like discussions like this. This is a way to celebrate Pride without really thinking about, having these like discussions rather than being at a bar and drinking and maybe attending a parade or whatever. All those things are great and they should continue. I think I read a meme somewhere online that said that the first Pride was a riot. Like, there's truth to that. Like, explore what that is. And sometimes just like, finding the history within our like culture is so important, and that's a way to celebrate. I think that, yeah, like someone said earlier, and I think Sarah can, chime in too, is like there's still work to be done. As well. And so getting involved is a huge part of celebrating Pride. And it doesn't have to cost you anything. I mean, giving your time is such a valuable thing. And there are people out there that are struggling and they literally just need that help, that support, that ear. And again, leaning on somebody to transition into their new life. So I'll kick it off to Sarah. I think she has something to add as well.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. And Lou, I was just jumping off of what you just said. There's so many great organizations in the state of Rhode Island and in the states that many of you are from that are doing great work that could use support. And if you're not comfortable volunteering, donations are always, always appreciated. Especially this past year, COVID has impacted nonprofit organizations throughout the country in a lot of different ways. And for an organization like Sojourner House, we saw our services skyrocketing. And so what we know about gifts and donations this past year, they were the highest that they've ever been. And so many of those organizations are now relying on those donations. So continue to give gift of time, gift of money, gift of knowledge and mentorship and support. YPI, Youth Pride in Rhode Island, is a great organization. SHIP, where Michelle is on the board, is another great organization. So there's lots of different places. There's also lots of events going on. And I know with COVID, they weren't really super publicized, but this weekend is Pride in Newport, Rhode Island. I'll be down there sitting at the Sage table trying to get more folks involved. They're also doing a Pride March along with Black Lives Matter this weekend in Providence. Woonsocket has some events going on Monday. That's the Rhode Island stuff that's going on. So just look into the ways. And, I think the other thing that's really important, how we show our pride, is taking the time to explain certain things to some people who might not have the same understanding. And I saw a meme recently and it struck me. I understand that the corporate cheerleading that goes on in June is a lot. And I wish that I saw that LGBTQ support throughout the entire year. But someone said something to me, they shared a meme on Facebook last week, and it said, I understand that we're annoyed with corporate America right now, but when I was a kid, to see all of that splashed all over the mall, all over online, that would have made the world of the difference to me as someone who was rejected by their peers. So if we just think of opportunities to potentially send the message to those in other areas of the state, in the country, all over, to let them know that you are loved, that you are accepted, and that there is a big contingency of supporters in this world, even if you don't feel supported by those who are closest to you. And that's a great way to show your pride.
Thank you so much for that, Sarah. Anyone else would like to talk about it?
I can add some information as well. And I think I agree with you, Sarah, as well. Like that splashing is amazing. I think it's even interesting when we see ads throughout the year, like you'll see something on TV like, oh, wow, that was a gay couple, that was a lesbian couple type of thing. And those are definitely nice things to see as well. And hopefully we start seeing more throughout the year and not just limited to June. I also agree with Lou as well. I think taking out just the fun stuff that we do and having these real conversations during Pride Month are helpful as well and celebrate as well. So this, I think one of the silver linings of being remote and in this environment we're in right now is access to programs like this, where it's like, okay, physically can't get down to Providence if this was we're in person right now or something like that. Whereas we have access to these conversations. And there's definitely been a lot of Zoom calls I've been on this month. We're exploring different facets of diversity and pride this month. Bringing it back home for our firm, for KPMG, we've been focused a lot on mental health, which I think is areas that are not discussed, especially important in these days that we're living through COVID times, and really how they impact the different organizations within our community. So there's been conversations around pride and mental health and different aspects that go into that type of mental health versus the Hispanic Latino community and things like that. So there's been a lot of conversations about mental health, which are good to see. And I think are really needed, especially in these times that we're living through right now.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I would like to just add, and I'll keep it brief, is that I think existence is an act of pride, and I think existence is an act of like rebellion and resilience. And I think just living your authentic life, whatever that looks like for you. I know sometimes it feels really hard. I think that alone is just, you know, a sheer act of pride. And so I like, good for you, and like keep going and keep trucking forward even when it feels really hard, because no matter what your multiple identities are, I know that can be the best act of pride.
Absolutely. Thank all four of you for answering that question. We do have our first question from the audience, and I want to dive into this to give you all an opportunity to respond. The first question is, we pride ourselves at JWU on being student-centered. What are tangible, genuine, and meaningful things we can do as staff and faculty to do every day to show our LGBTQ students that we see them and that they belong?
I
Jonathan,
can
do you go
start.
first?
Sure. I think it's a tough question. I think the tangible aspect is what I struggle with. I think really, if I think back to my days and obviously Johnson Wales and even before that, I think having the space safe in the classroom and having a professor, faculty, staff, somebody really be there for you as needed, I would say. I think like we open the program, having the safe space. If you hear things, I think that's kind of the duty, that to say, okay, like, let me step in. But I think it's also a fine line not to overstep as well, because you don't want anyone to feel outed or something like that. So it's really this fine line of having a safe space for students, for faculty for whoever really needs it there. That's what I would say, and be really a listener, I would say.
I would also add that, using as inclusive language as possible, not assuming anybody's identity, but also taking it a step further and changing the graphics that are done or changing your curriculum so that way you tell more the narrative of, the LGBTQI community. Also, I always remember this from high school, but, in one of our lit classes, we debated marriage equality. And so some people had to take a pro and some people had to take an against stance. And I don't want anybody to have to argue over my basic rights and what I should be afforded. And I think being mindful, if there are activities like that, how can you change the activity to accomplish the same thing, but you're not arguing against somebody's right to exist, their right to marriage, their right to happiness. And I think that's just another step that we can take to continue to evolve our curriculum to be more inclusive and dynamic. And if you see something that's problematic within the curriculum or within a textbook, skip it or find a different example. Like I personally still walk away from that experience in high school. And I feel like even though maybe my co-students didn't actually feel that way, I still feel very wounded from that because it felt like somebody was literally arguing against me.
That's a wonderful perspective to have.
Just as simple as maybe putting a pride sticker on your computer, on your office window or door, putting something in a syllabus or in your policy that says, please email me your pronouns, or anything that you want me to know about yourself. It just sends the message to people that you're a safe space. And it's just a little, we all have our pronouns on our names. Maybe you want to consider putting that in your email signature. There's lots of small, little tangible things that you can do that sends the message to those who see it. Okay, you're a safe person.
Absolutely. Thank you for answering that question. We have another question, and it's almost a two-parter in some ways. The question is, how would you encourage LGBTQ, or let me start that over again. How would you and why would you encourage LGBTQ prospective students and parents to consider JWU as their collegiate choice?
I'll kick that one off. It's very simple, and it's opportunity. The opportunities are endless. The possibilities of meeting your future boss while you're still a student is very possible at the university. And I think, you hear like on the job experience, like that kind of thing. The school really does a great job preparing you for that, giving you the opportunity to do externships and actually work out in the field. And getting credit for it. I mean, the opportunity to do that is so important. And some of those things can't be taught from a textbook. And the school knows that. They understand the professors, and they encourage you to participate and seek those opportunities, or at least point you in the direction of that. And I think that having those connections, even as a freshman, is just so like unheard of at other places. I mean, I have had friends that have gone to other schools, public and private, and they couldn't believe some of the things that I was already doing year one at my school. So again, just very simple. It's just, you have your leverage, is the opportunity. So from the beginning.
Thank you, Lou. Would anyone else like to pick up on that?
I'm curious about the aspect of the question about why would you encourage prospective students to attend? And I think maybe it's more of a challenge for the admissions team, but I wonder how involved the admissions folks are on campus and high schools with some of the organizations that exist on campus already. So whether it's a Pride Alliance or just other organizations, like how involved are the current students in really getting the message out that Johnson Wales is a great university for the prospective students, and fill in the blank as to why. So I'm really curious as to any steps taken from that aspect from the university. I think we think about it as a global firm as well, where we're also trying to recruit students to come work for us, and how we compete in that very competitive environment.
And I think the second part of that question is really interesting as well, that talks about, how would we, encourage LGBTQ prospective students and families to consider JWU as their choice. Several of you have spoken about sort of finding your tribe here and finding your fit and finding an environment that supports who you are and where you are on your journey. So how could we reach out to additional folks who may be in the market looking for college experiences that would be aligned with yours?
I mean, I think it's definitely, I think we rely on a lot of alumni as well, because you get both sides of it. You say, okay, I was there, I found my fit, I found my tribe, now I'm here. This is a great place to work because of that reason. I think that's really merging too, and that's probably why we're all here today as well, to really share our experiences within the university community, as well as outside of the community, and how they're so linked as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We have another question. If you could go back, and I'm going to put on my welcoming and my Oprah hat, if you will. That's the sort of question. If you could go back, what would you tell your younger self, or wish someone had told you to support navigating your experience of coming out and living authentically?
I would tell myself, you idiot. Like, why did you not? I think a huge part of it is like, I did not embrace who I was for a really long time. And I definitely blame a lot of things. Like, I could list them all, but we don't got time for that. And I just wish that, if I was talking to my younger self, I just wish that I would say, you don't have to have all the answers right now, and you don't have to be afraid either, and you can have it all. Like, you can have a career, you can have a good education, you can have a healthy relationship with your parents, which took so long to accomplish. And I just wish I didn't kick myself so much over being hung up over the fact that I was never going to be accepted, and that's how I felt. And I feel like that's what was ingrained in my brain, but I feel like I unlearned that much later in life than I wish. Like, I was 8-year-old Michelle, like, learning that, and 16-year-old Michelle really being able to delve in and embrace that, and 18-year-old college Michelle, like, ready and just so much more open because I had come into my own. I wish that's what I would tell myself, is like, just it's okay, but let's get it together. Come on.
Michelle, thank you so much for that. We are running really close on time, so I'm going to have you have the last word on this. Jonathan, Michelle, Sarah, and Lou, you made my job easy. Thank you so much for your time today. I'd now like to turn it over to Laurie Zavada, the Director of Alumni Relations and a fellow alum, to close the program.
Thank you, Damien. And thank you once again to our panelists. We're so grateful to have shared this space with you all. We appreciate you spending your time with us today and sharing your experiences with your fellow alumni. It was a great way to celebrate Pride Month. Johnson & Wales University is firmly committed to nurturing and further strengthening an inclusive and equitable environment that embraces the broad range of diversity of all members of our community, no matter their race, gender, identity, sexual orientation, ethnicity, age, physical ability, or how and if they worship. I'd also like to thank all of our alumni in attendance today. Your participation shows your support and your interest in staying connected with your alma mater. Our university depends on support from our entire community to provide the full JWU experience. Tuition alone does not fully cover all of the opportunities that set Johnson & Wales apart, from the classroom experience all the way to student clubs and orgs. Your gift directly and immediately supports current students and has the power to open doors and a whole new world of opportunities. Gifts of all amounts add up, and together we can make an impact that's truly powerful. If you're in a position to give back, you can do so by clicking the link in the chat window. Thank you for your support. I sincerely hope that you enjoyed today's discussion, part of the JWU Connects family of programming, and I hope that you will join us again in the future. For the full listing of upcoming events, please visit the event calendar at alumni.jwu.edu. Thank you again for joining and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Happy Pride, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.